Witty, thought-provoking, and uplifting, Southern Soul Livestream is a program that you'll invite your friends over to watch every week, where you'll learn about interesting guests and get to share in their fascinating experiences. Tune in each Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to connect with guests from across the generations and to laugh with our eclectic hosts who are as charming as they are talented. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's our host, Calvin.
Dr. Kellie Goss, how you doing, girl?
I'm doing good. Oh, I'm so excited to be with you guys this evening. Hey,
Oh,
everybody.
what's up? I'm so excited. I mean, I know when we sat down and we kind of talked about the show, and thank you to
hmm
Erica for connecting us. It was just like, you know, I try to claim to know a lot about a lot of topics, but this is one of the topics I just didn't know much about, right? So as I began to, dig into this, I just had my OMG moment, right? That I was like,
hmm
I know that everything is crazy going on in society, but man, it's like there is no safe haven. But I would love for, if you don't mind, just introducing yourself, telling people a little bit about you, who you are, your background, and your origin story, right? So you can wrap all that up
Yes.
in one, but let's get started with, just let us know who you are.
Thank you again for the invitation, and thank you especially to Erica for connecting us. I'm Kellie Goss. I am an Army brat who was also a soldier who married a soldier, and we settled down here in Atlanta, and we've been here now for a little bit more than 15 years. And I am What am I mostly? I'm a Sagittarius. I like thrift shopping. I like traveling with my family. And I like hanging out with friends. I like good food. I'm a foodie. And I'm a previvor. And a lot of people don't know what a previvor is. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here to share with you all tonight. So I have never had cancer, but my mother and my sister have had breast cancer. My mother's had breast cancer twice. And based on my genetic testing results, I decided to have a preventive mastectomy and hysterectomy to make sure that I didn't get cancer. And so I love to share a little bit more about my story with you all, but that's kind of the overarching picture.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know when we first sat down, I just was like, wow. And I remember thinking, as you told the story, you're like, I think it was like, hey, I'm going through this, and I'm like, is this going to be the month? Is this going to be the month?
Yes,
No, I'm high risk. Is this going to be the month? And all I could imagine
yes.
is the amount of stress
hmm
a person would go
Yes.
through just waking up every day, knowing that like,
hmm
in your family you have these things, and then you know, so then I started some research, right? And I decided to look
hmm
in, because I'm one of the person I kind of watch TV, and I was like, oh, I think there's a lot of organizations doing things. You got pink things everywhere, right? You got
Right,
pink drills, you got pink football helmets.
right,
I think
right.
everything's okay, but then I
hmm
began to step into the story, and I discovered
Yes,
for the black community and for black women, it's not always that case. But I
that's
would love to
right.
hear about your biggest fears on what
Yeah.
I would consider, I'm calling it your breast cancer journey. Even
hmm
though, you are a previvor, but
hmm
because and it's really going to come together. But tell us about some of your greatest fears on your journey.
Of course. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that because what you're saying is absolutely true. So my mother had breast cancer the first time when I was in college. And so it wasn't like the way that it is now. So I was almost separated from my family in a way because, now we have social media, we have FaceTime. It's easy for people to connect. Not to tell you all my age, but back then there was none of that. And so my parents really shielded me a lot of what my mother was going through. So I felt almost isolated. And so, because I didn't know what was going on, and my mother is the center, the nucleus of our family, and I couldn't really fathom everything that she was going through. And they would tell me bits and pieces. So it's like your imagination just really plays tricks on you. And so I imagined the worst. So whatever you think breast cancer is, imagine someone in college that couldn't really communicate thinking the worst. Whatever the worst was, triple that. And so that was kind of my existence. And because my mother is truly the glue that holds our family together, I worried about that. And so fast forward to when I have my own kids, I'm out, I'm about, I'm doing things, I'm in the army. um, I was worried about my own bout with breast cancer because I figured, if my mom had it, it's likely that I'll have it. And for those of you, what I'm saying is not, you all know this when you go to your doctor, they ask you your medical history and you have to share with them that mama, grandmama, big mama, all of them had A, B, and C. And so it kind of defines who you are in terms of your medical history because that's the underlying information that they have. And so that's how I live my life. And so every month I would sometimes do my self breast exams, but likely not because my mother found her lumps with self breast exam. So I was always so worried about what I would find. And so that was my life. I was just waiting on breast cancer to find me. I was waiting on my chance at breast cancer, almost like a rites of passage, right? Because that's how it is. Well, my aunt had it and my mom had it. So sure, I'm going to have it. So I'll just wait for my turn. And that's pretty much the existence that I lived for several years. My mother got breast cancer again, and the situation was much different. Now we could communicate. I was older. I could fly in to see her. I could help and aid her and walk her through the process. And I was still crippled with fear. Like I was still so afraid of losing her, of figuring out what that meant for me and my breast cancer journey, whatever that looked like. And so, yeah, so everything that you said is absolutely true. The fear just really crippled me. And so, because I didn't do a very good job of doing my self breast exams every year, I did do a very, very good job of making sure that I got my annual mammograms to the point where, the American Cancer Society says that you're not supposed to get your mammogram before the age of 40. And I fought with my insurance provider to make sure that based on my medical history, I got mammograms earlier than that. I think I got my first mammogram when I was 33, but it wasn't something that yeah, sure, we'll give you a mammogram. Like, I'm telling you that my mom has had breast cancer twice, and you're still telling me that I had to wait until I'm 40. So one of the lessons, if you don't take away anything from what I'm saying this evening, is we certainly, as Black women, have to advocate for ourselves. Black women get breast cancer less, but we die more. And there are a lot of varying factors because of that. A lot of times as Black women, we are kind of the tent poles that hold everything together. We, give to ourselves last, right? And so I may not go to the doctor because I have A, B, and C that I need to get done. I'm just going to put that off for a little bit longer. And I'm speaking for Kellie, so I don't want to tell anyone else's stories, but I'm speaking for me. A lot of times I will put myself last to make sure that everybody else is okay. And so because we do that sometimes, and it's done so often that many times when Black women find out that they are actually have breast cancer, it's not as treatable. And so that's why, even though we get breast cancer less, we are dying more from breast cancer. So I know that was a long roundabout
No, no,
way
no.
of
Thank you
telling
for
that.
sharing that because, it's all a part of the story. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking about those times, right? Those moments of fears. It seems like you're
Yes.
probably in your 20s when you first started this journey
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that. And
Yeah.
I can imagine you, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
speaking with doctors, them not really taking you seriously, but really
No,
advocating for yourself. And I can just think about
that
the
is
whole
key.
process of, you know, things may have changed, a few years later. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but it's like you still have to advocate for
You
yourself because
do.
you know your history. Recently, I love watching, current events. And just what, yesterday, it was
Mm-hmm.
announced that a WNBA player
Mm-hmm.
was lost. And she
Mm-hmm.
was 37 years old. Tiffany
Right.
Jackson is
That's
I think
right.
her name. So I began to kind of look into her story. And as I looked into her story, she was 37, but
Mm-hmm.
she first discovered her lump when she was playing in a championship,
Mm-hmm.
but chose not to really tell anyone
Mm-hmm.
because she was competing. That thing you're
Right.
saying, that strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
In addition to when she finally got around to tell people, it was, she said, a group text message. In a group
Mm-hmm.
text message because she was just so, so, so overwhelmed.
Right.
So it's real, right? 37, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's very real. So one of the things that you share with me that I really appreciate is the story about how, well, you call it I miss real hugs, right? And I love
Mhm.
that statement because it's one of the things that people just really can't really even fathom. Tell us about this
Mhm.
concept, this thing that you wrote about when you began to say you miss real hugs. What is that about?
Yeah. Yes. So based on the results of my genetic testing, I had a 75% chance of having breast cancer and an 80% chance of having ovarian cancer within my lifetime. And so once I knew the results of what my genetic test, because like I was sharing with you before, I always kind of had, okay, my mom had it, so I'll probably get it. But once I knew what those numbers were, that made it more real. And so once I decided to have my mastectomy and hysterectomy, so I'll just focus on the mastectomy. So once I decided to have my mastectomy, I was very, very conflicted because as a woman, there's so much tied to my breasts, right? Nurse my daughter with my breasts. It's the thing that people see when I walk into a door. It's the thing that makes me feel, you know, like me in a lot of ways. And so I really would struggle with whether or not to have a mastectomy. Um, and people were very vocal about whether or not that was a good idea. And so I felt even more conflicted about the idea about whether or not it was the right thing to do. And so what happens after I had my surgery, I came home completely flat chested. And so what happens after that is you get these things they're called expanders. And expanders to me, I describe them like a balloon. And so I come home completely flat chested, but with expanders. And with the expanders, I go back to the doctor every 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get my new breasts like blown up. And so they puff you up and they puff you up until you get to the desired size that works with your body type and that your skin can kind of manage. And so with expanders, they're like rocks. Like when someone leans into you, it's like rocks. Even now, even though now I'm on the other side of the expander phase, and I have my implants. I'm always very uncomfortable with people hugging me because I always wonder, can they tell? Do they know that I have implants? Because when you are brushing yourself up against somebody's bosoms or getting close to somebody, like there's a special, like there's, like Big Mama's bosoms, like that's a special sacred place. And so I always worry that people can tell that I'm different somehow and that there is something noticeably um, changed about me. So I'm very self-conscious about that. So yeah, I miss real hugs because now hugs don't provide the same comfort that they did before because I'm always worried that when I hug people, can they tell?
Wow. I mean, just speechless at the thought of that, of, like you said, an experience from your
Hmm.
whole life, right? Like you said, you have children, so, and you nurse your children. And
Hmm.
it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, just no words can explain it.
Hmm.
As I began to do research, I began to realize that sometimes people just say some, let's say, stupid things that are unkind, stuff like,
Hmm.
well, at least you got, a breast implant or a boob job or
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Have people said like stupid, crazy stuff like that to you?
Yes, that is like the number one thing that is said. And so, at least you got a free boob job out of it. Mastectomy is not the same. Like when I shared with you all, like I came home completely flat chested, like because they took out um everything. And so I came home completely flat chested and I had to be totally reconstructed. And so that's certainly different from a mastectomy is different from reconstructive surgery because with reconstruction, you build up from something. And so I having a mastectomy is like starting from scratch, if I can describe it that way, because you're it's like building from the top up. With reconstruction, you at least have something. If I'm gonna, I have boobs, I maybe add something to it to enhance it. But a mastectomy is totally different. It's a totally different experience. As a matter of fact, my surgery was 12 hours long with three different surgeons. And so it's a totally different experience. And at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, like, did I make the right decision? But now, 4 years later, looking back at everything, like, there's no other decision that I could have made. because again, like I shared with you, once I knew the numbers, it was almost inevitable. And I really felt like it was the best decision for me. Now, it may not be the best decision for everyone else. And again, it's not a decision that I made independently. It's one that I made collectively with my family. We talked about it because I knew that I had this 75% chance of breast cancer. There are different options that are offered. I could have done advanced screening. And so what that means is I get my mammogram more regularly. I get an MRI twice a year. So that way they can take a more proactive approach and try to, even if I were to get breast cancer, they would likely catch it earlier because I would be doing a more robust surveillance to try to make sure that they catch it early. So, but I decided that was still living my life in fear. And so I didn't think that was the best route for me, but it may very well be the best route for someone else. But I'm grateful for where I am now, and I'm thankful that I made the decision that I did.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I remember when we first kind of chatted, I was kind of thinking about the fear, the stress, the anxiety, the mental health. But then as I started reading and doing some research, I began to really understand the world of cancer. And in the
Hmm.
world of cancer, what I concluded in my words is that it's still quite primitive medicine. And this one lady she said she was 41 and she essentially went through 6 weeks of um, radiation and
Hmm.
then and she went through all of the weird things, weird experiences, people treating her different, people, you know, um, really flirting with her more because all of a sudden now she's this object, right? And all of a sudden, after 6 months of chemo, then she does, this outpatient surgery, and she's back to work like in 2 weeks. And what she says is that if she lived another 41 years, she still don't feel that she would feel like she's healed from that 6 months of trauma that her body went through. I
Hmm.
love that story. I love that testimony because she
Hmm.
began to share just how gruesome it can be and how horrible and how lonely
Hmm.
it can be. Simple
Hmm.
things like, oh, you beat cancer, you're so strong. And she's like, I don't feel like I'm strong. I don't feel like I'm anything different
Right.
than the next person. I was lucky. And it was like
Hmm.
all of the stigma and even the national organizations that are supposed to be supporting the women, the women who are experiencing these things, may even seem like they're more focused on the pinks and the colors and
Hmm.
the pink helmets and stuff like that. And I was like,
Hmm.
it's one thing to go through the emotional thing, the
Right.
fear and the stress, but who would want to subject themselves to that
Mm-mm.
world of capitalist medicine, excuse me, getting a little political, that just
Hmm.
doesn't seem like it's all together. So as I begin to that, I begin to really honor your decision in a different way because all I could do is read about it and try to understand. But
Hmm.
OMG, what a moment. I would like to kind of talk about the risks, right? And
Hmm.
just just the facts. You also kind of wrote about, some of the just the facts. If you don't mind breaking down for us, when it comes to breast cancer, what are the risks and what are these nuances of black women? And I'm glad you mentioned black women are less likely to get breast cancer, but more likely to die from it. And here at
Hmm.
Southern Soul, we tend to pay attention to disparities. And this
Hmm.
disparity simply means is that if one group of people are dying more or essentially not healing the same
Hmm.
as another group of people, then what's up with that? But if you don't mind
Hmm.
sharing with us, some of your thoughts about just the facts of, breast cancer in black women.
See, a lot of it too, to be honest with you, is historical in nature. Um, I'm finding just being surrounded by the breast cancer community is that there are like as an example, there are several clinical trials that they think that could move the that could really make an impact on breast cancer. But within these clinical trials, they can't get Black women to sign up. And so I'm just going to go on a limb and say it's likely because we don't trust y'all. Like, We saw what happened in Tuskegee, and we saw what happened with Henrietta Lacks, and we're very, we're gonna trust y'all. So, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. So, even though there may be progressive movement out there. Um, I won't say the Black women are included because I know that they would love to include us in a lot of ways in those different studies, but we just are not having it. Like we aren't having it. And then a lot of times, again, just fly on the wall, listening and hearing the different things is that a lot of times in Black families, the mom is the primary breadwinner. So when mom gets ill or when mom gets sick, that takes money off of the table, or I'm sorry, takes money out of the household and takes food off of the table. Some of these clinical trials that are offered, they want people to participate, but don't offer anything for your time or for your trouble. And so, what is the benefit to me to help you if there isn't any value for me? Like, I've traveled, I've taken 3 buses to get here, and you offered me cold coffee. There's nothing really of value. What did I gain out of this? What I'm doing, offering myself trying trial medication or experimental drugs, is likely to help somebody else. And so that's good, but how has it me being here impacted my family today? And so, they've talked about, I've been in a couple of different rooms where they've talked about possibly, and a lot of people will, but most of them are still working towards this, giving stipends and, paying for daycare, providing care for children when the mom wants to come in, or, providing, what do you call it? Can't think of it, like per diem for people that even have to bring mom to stay with her when she comes to do the care. So yes, so I know that's a long answer to say there's a gap between how Black people view medical professionals and where we need to go.
Thanks for sharing that. Last week we had a show with a vascular surgeon. And one of the things he's passionate about in his retirement is normalizing not only restorative health, but family medical history.
Mm-hmm.
And as we chatted about that, and Letitia's going to give us a recap of that show, but one of the things I really, really could appreciate is the concept of what it means for our community to get the help they need. And I
Mm-hmm.
can tell that you are very passionate about this topic, so I'm definitely going to get in the Kool-Aid a little bit. Do you have like any recommendations, or do you think, you know, any suggestions for what we can do as a community to essentially support some of those progressive, trials or things like that? Because I know I can tell that you move in a lot of circles within the breast cancer community. Is there any consensus, or do you have any personal thoughts on what can be done?
Yeah, I definitely think the clinical trials need to be widely shared. Sometimes, like I said before, it's like they're known but not willingly accepted, just because we aren't there yet. And so there could be so I don't even think that it's us so much, because I really think that the onus is on them to make us feel like we can trust them to take care of us and to value us, not just to value us and what we're offering, but to value our opinions, to value our bodies, to value our work. Like, there's so much more that can be done to make us have a level of comfort. And so, because the options are out there, and I know they're so hungry to, and there's such a void because the clinical trials are there, and I see so many asks from week after week is, do you know any Black females from this range to this range, because we would love to have them. But again, the level of onus is on these organizations, these hospitals, these medical communities, to really establish the trust or rebuild trust, because that has certainly been broken. And then the other thing I'd like to share is that make a concession for those women that would like to have this type of, who would like to be a part of, because some people are just altruistic in a way of, I love everybody. I want to help people. I'm going through this. I'm going to do my best to help everybody. But these are same people that have real life issues and have real life bills. So how can you help them in this moment when they are willing and able to help someone else? And so that's another thing that needs to be explored too. And yeah, I just think that the onus is on them to bridge that gap. And I really hope that the medical communities are able to do that in such a way that makes sense and feels good to everybody that's affected.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just kind of describe this BCRA, and I just want to read,
Hmm.
excuse me, read something that you wrote. Um, BCRA stands for, breast cancer susceptibility gene. And one thing you've described is everyone has this BRCA gene,
Hmm.
in one from a mother, one from a father.
Hmm.
And when they function properly, these genes help suppress cancer tumors within us. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, when the BRCA gene mutates, it increases one's likelihood of breast and ovarian cancer.
Hmm.
There are two types of BRCA genes, one BRCA1 and BRCA2. And in your experience, you were positive
Hmm.
for the BRCA1 gene mutation. Tell us a little bit
Hmm.
about that because I've heard about, double, triple, and nuances. Tell us about
Hmm.
the various diagnoses, if you don't mind.
Right. So I see that Margaret in the chat talked about Angelina Jolie, and to be honest, that's the first time I ever heard about BRCA positive being having any surgeries to do with that is Angelina Jolie. She's a famous name. She made the surgeries famous. And that's really all that I knew. Like, and I think that I might have heard about that on TV, like some morning television show, but I knew that Angelina Jolie had had the surgeries. And so one of the other questions that Margaret asked was, how was it available to me? So my doctor was my primary care physician. Thank goodness for him. He recommended that I have have genetic testing done many years ago. He gave me the paperwork. He talked me through it. He told me that my likelihood it was possible based on my mother having had breast cancer twice, and that he thought that it would be a good idea if I got tested. So he walked me and talked me through everything, gave me the paperwork, and he was like, I can test you right now. And I was like, no, I got stuff to do. I'll do it my next appointment. I appreciate you telling me about it. This is awesome. I heard about it, right? Angelina Jolie, right? And so it sounded like a good idea, but I wasn't really, I don't want to say I didn't care. It wasn't a priority. It wasn't a priority. So 5 years later, I went to another appointment, and this was a GYN appointment. And a nurse practitioner, she asked me if I wanted to get tested. Again, reading my family history. And she said, I think that you should get genetically tested. I was like, oh, yeah, my primary care physician told me about that. Sounds like a good idea. The Angelina Jolie test, right? And she was like, yeah. And so she's like, we can do it right now. I can walk you through the steps. And I was like, oh, he talked me through it. I'm good, but I'm in a hurry. But I'll get it next time. And so she told me, she said, it's only going to take a minute. I was like, oh, but I'm rushing. And she's like, really, just 2 seconds, and then I'll call you with the results. And so I was like, okay. And I did it. Literally, what she said was true. It took 2 seconds. It was a blood draw. It took less than 2 seconds. I think I had to walk down the hall to go to the lab. It took 2 seconds. And so because she had told me, I think that she had told me that, she told me they would send me the results in the mail. And then when she called me, I got concerned because why are you calling me when you told me that you would mail me the results? And so I was instantly concerned. And so she said that you should come in. And I instantly got scared. So everything that I was afraid of my whole life was I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I couldn't eat. It was instantly realized. I didn't know what BRCA was, BRCA1, BRCA2, BRCA 3, 4, 5. I got to know anything about it. All I knew was, why are you calling me in? Like, why are we doing this? You told me you were going to send. So I went in and she shared my results with me. She almost like pushed it to me and she let me read it myself. And I instantly started crying, like full on crying. And I was so embarrassed. I remember thinking to myself, like, why are you crying? Like, you don't have cancer. Like, this is so weird. Like, why, like, pull yourself together. But I think that I was crying and I was so devastated by knowing what the results were, is because it was almost like the fear being realized. Now it was real. It wasn't just me thinking about it. The numbers made it real. And that was the day that I found out that I was BRCA1 positive. And 75% is to me, felt like a lot. 75% chance you'll get breast cancer. To me, that felt like a lot. To a lot of other people, it might not, be a lot. But to me, 75%, that was a lot to me. It was enough for me to feel like I needed to do something differently.
Thanks for sharing that. How about misconceptions in the Black
Mm-hmm.
community? Do you see any common misconceptions, having, now that you've gone through the process, and I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure you're more informed than the average person, do you see any consistent or continuous misconceptions out there?
I know for myself, just like when I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do, is that everyone that was having like preventative surgeries was white. And so I didn't really, so I just instantly was like, okay, this is a white girl thing. This isn't something that Black people do. Like, but it made, like, I was so conflicted because it made sense to me, but I didn't see me. Like, the first place you go, right, is when anything goes to hell in the Easter basket, is you go to Google to try to figure out what's going on. And when I would do the searches, I um I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And so even though I'm like, okay, you have a 70%, like that's a lot. Like, you got to do something, right? But I thought that it was like, is it lame? Like, like I really couldn't, when you don't see yourself represented, I just didn't think that it was a decision that was for me until I really just talked with my family. And to be honest with you, there were two things that made me feel like, okay, this is it. You made the right decision. The first being, because when I told my friends about it, and to be honest with you, I kept the people that I told really, really small, because people, like I told you before, had really strong opinions about what I was doing. Like, why would you do that? Like, you don't have cancer, so why would you get your breast cut off? And well, if you get cancer, you could just pray about it. God will heal you. God can fix anything. And I believe that. I'm God fearing. My mother's a preacher. My husband's a preacher. I believe that God is a God that can do all things. So then it made me question my faith walk. Like, is God in this? Am I missing God in this season? So that was the first thing. So when I had my surgery, or decided to have my surgery, I had three different surgeons that day. My breast surgeon, she came in and she said, I really would love it if you would allow me to pray with you before we do your surgery. And that to me was confirmation that God was indeed in it and in control. So that's number one. The second thing that confirmed that I made the right decision is me and my sister are both BRCA1 positive, and my sister, we were both tested at the same time. And after we were tested and knew that we were both positive for the BRCA1 gene, my sister got breast cancer. And so seeing my mother go through that, watching one of her daughters go through what she went through, broke my heart, like literally in half. My mother was a shell of herself during that time. When my sister was going through chemo radiation, like the glue that holds our family together that I was telling you guys about was in shambles. And so I knew that I couldn't watch my mother have another daughter go through breast cancer. I couldn't be the daughter to put her through that again. And that was a second confirmation that I had, that I knew that I had made the right decision.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, and oh my, I'm just speechless because you mentioned your sister, and I was like, man, it keeps going, right? One of
Mm-hmm.
the things that you said that really um, reminds me of a favorite statement is representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm never a fan of cliches, but that's one that kind of means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
Representation matters, and people are like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important that, like you said, if we don't see people who look like us,
Mm-hmm.
who experience these things, then it's easy to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's a white girl thing, or that's white folks' problems, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you're God fearing, you're spiritual, and the fact that one person chose to pray with you is so so important because essentially they were communicating
Mm-hmm.
in a language that was important to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I could only imagine how lonely that journey was of going through these experiences and not seeing anyone
Yeah.
who can be like, oh, girl, I went through it and I made it. I can only imagine support groups where people look differently and you can't even talk to anybody who gets it, right?
Yeah. That is the truth. I love that you said that, because that was a very, very real emotion. And it was isolating. It felt like I was on an island by myself, and I didn't know who I could talk to about it that would understand. And then it's almost like, you want support. I mean, because it's a very real. You're having a major surgery, so just take out the whole breast cancer thing, or breast have, but a major surgery where you're going to be put under. That's already a worry in itself. But to know that you're having surgery to prevent cancer, but you don't have cancer. And so it was, it was lonely. It was isolating. And I kept my circle very, very small for that reason. And I surrounded myself with people that could feed into me. Because by the end of it, before this, I was just depleted. I was tired of explaining to people why I thought it was a good decision. Like, I was tired of having to validate the rationale. Like, I was done. It was exhausting.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I like the fact that you surrounded yourself with sisterhood, right? I
Mhm.
can tell, I reached out to one of your colleagues
Mhm.
and I connected with you through Erica and I'm like, oh wow, she's doing the sisterhood thing. Tell us about, your breast cancer journey and sisterhood. How it was important, how you created sisterhood. Once again, in this lonely place where nobody looks like you. One of the things that
Mhm.
you wrote that I really enjoyed, you said, well, simple, the little things like how I look in my favorite sorority shirt, right? It's like simple
Mhm.
things that people who look like
Yeah.
you can be like, yeah, girl, I get it, right?
Oh.
But the loneliness without even just having those simple things. But you
Mhm.
found sisterhood. Tell us about sisterhood
Mhm.
and your journey to sisterhood.
That's the part that I'm most excited about, because I really don't think that you can get through an experience like this without community. And, typically I'm a very quiet, private person. And, growing up, we're told, don't be out there telling everybody my business. But I really felt like it was, oh, good. Yeah, I'm a Tiger Lily advocate. Yes, that is an amazing organization. Yeah. Um, Onish shared that. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Yes, they're amazing. Um, so yeah, creating community is very important, because I don't know how anybody could get through an experience like this without. I'm so excited. Okay, I'm sorry. So I don't know how anybody could get through an experience like this and not have somebody that understands, that gets it, to kind of forge the gap and bridge the gap. And so I think I may have shared it with you early on when we talked, was like, in the beginning of it all, I could only think about what I would lose, would I lose my breast, would I lose my femininity, how different would I be and what people know and kind of how would that shift my story? Would it change my quality of life? Would I be able to run and jump? And, so I could only think about those things. I could only think about the physical aspects of what I was doing. But man, when I tell you that everything I've gained has just been amazing. I've gained a sisterhood. There, like Bernice was sharing, there's so many different organizations that are out here to support you. Tiger Lily Foundation for the Breast of Us is another organization. I'm part of the Breasties, and I'm their director for diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a matter of fact, we were just on GMA on Monday doing the first ever live self breast exam. So there's power in community. There's nothing like it. Nothing can what's the word I'm thinking of? Nothing can take its place. Because when I'm talking to my friends that haven't had the surgeries that I had, they can, listen. But for me to tell them that I'm having a really bad day, A, B, and C, and this is why, sometimes you don't even have to say the words if you're in community because they just get it. It's just a feeling. And so I'm grateful for that. It's opened up so many doors for me, and it's taken me out of my comfort zone. And it's given me a voice and my passion that I didn't even really know was possible, because I want people, when they're making a decision like I did, I want them to be able to see themselves represented. So you might not have the surgeries like I did, but you'll leave this conversation knowing maybe I should ask my doctor about genetic testing. And to me, that's a win, because if you have genetic testing, you know what the risks are, and then you can navigate your medical decision and your health choices differently. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to convince anybody or talk them into these surgeries. That's secondary, because that's a personal and individual decision. You do what you want to do about those surgeries. But I am telling you, you need to ask your doctor to get you genetically tested. I am saying that.
Awesome, awesome. I am a fan of community. I'm a fan. And, I remember once I was chatting with someone about community, and they're like, "Well, Calvin, you're doing this thing and you're building this business. Like, you can do it by yourself. You don't need help." I'm like, "Yeah, but you realize I'm a community builder, right?" And as a community builder, it means something different. And here at Southern Soul, we definitely believe in community. That's why we're here. Today,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a serious topic, but we cover any topic that affects the Black community. So, as you talk about sisterhood and community, it just reminds me of the excitement when I'm talking to someone about the show and all of a sudden they get it, right? And they be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's important because of this and because of that, and because of this, and we
Yeah.
need this and we need that." And then
Yeah.
you get people who've been around since day two, and they be like, "Huh, yeah, I guess that's okay." It's so different, right? When
Mm-hmm.
people get it. So kudos to you,
Yes.
and kudos to your journey. How about this? As we begin to wrap up, and there's a few questions in the chat. I'm going to need your help, Tamika, to kind of find those questions if they scrolled up. But I want to hear from the audience. Feel free to type your questions in the chat. But let's talk about what's next with you. Tamika's going to share your information of how people can follow you on, I think she's going to share Facebook and probably Instagram or something. I don't know. But let us know what's next for you, right? What's going on? How can our audience support you, support your message, support your work? What's next for Dr. Goss?
First, I just wanted to thank you all for the opportunity. You've been amazing, and your team has been amazing, and I'm just grateful to be here with you all. I don't have like this large thing going on, right? My thing is I just want to get the message out about the importance of genetic testing, because I know that it's an adage and we all say it, but knowledge is power. Knowing those numbers can make all the difference in the world. And that's all I'm really out here saying. I don't have anything to promote or anything. I just want everybody to know that it really can make a difference. Like when you were sharing the story about the WNBA player, I got so sad because, I feel like the more we know, the more that we can really work to to pass. What's the word I'm looking for? when we know what those numbers are, we can work to get the type of screening and surveillance that we need, and we can make a proactive decision. Because if you're doing double mammograms a year, if you're genetically tested and you find that you have a higher probability of cancer, and if you're doing double mammograms a year, there's a increased likelihood that you may find the cancer early and it may be treatable. And so another thing I want to say is, again, I'll speak for Kelly. A lot of times we're doing a lot, the most, right? And we're taking care of everyone else, but we don't do the best job of taking care of ourselves. And so, what I will say also is to just make sure that you're taking care of you and that you're not pouring from an empty cup. And one of the things that we were talking about earlier this week is to know your normal, know what normal looks like. Poke, feel, prod, do your self exams every month, do them at the same time each month so that you know if something's not right, you catch it early, because that's going to make a difference. If you are able to catch the problem early, you're going to be able to make a better decision about kind of what needs to be happen to make sure that you're here for your family, for your friends, and for you. And so those are the two things, right? Know your normal and get genetically tested if you can.
Awesome, awesome. Now, with your testing, and Tamika, let me know if you had some questions in the chat if I missed anything. But one of the things you said about your screening is that you had a percentage. Do the
Hmm.
various screenings come with different percentages, or is it all the same?
They do.
Like,
They
how does that work?
do. Yeah, so and it's not just because normally people hear a lot about BRCA, but there are other genetic probabilities as well. And so based on, they'll give you the percentage of each. And because I have the BRCA gene mutation, it generally affects breast and ovarian cancers. But there are, you can get screened and they have genetic counselors that will walk you and talk you through everything that you need to be aware of, everything that you need to take notice to. And so I know that my insurance paid for that opportunity, but a lot of people don't even know to ask. Just ask the question, and it will likely only be, to be honest with you, I don't want to misspeak because I don't even know the cost because, again, my insurance was thoughtful enough to pay it. But it's worth the ask. And just ask and then have a genetic counselor go over everything with you, because there's more than just BRCA out there. And it helps if you're informing, exactly what you need to be mindful of, and so that you can do a better job of navigating your health journey.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see if we go to the audience. Let's see.
So,
Just some, I think go ahead.
actually, Dr. Kelly was answering questions as they
Hmm.
were coming through.
Hmm.
So
So
there,
there weren't any new.
yeah.
Okay, let's see. Benita Clark had one.
Yeah, Bernita's right too. Yep, that's another one. That's another gene mutation. Oh, do they really cost $3,500? Thank God for this military insurance.
So I'm just
Wow.
going to read those for the recording. Is that let's see, genetic testing is critical, and that's how she learned that she had, and I don't PALB2 gene mutation. So it seems like that's another one.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a group of tests that came out what in 2010, I think. That was around 3,500. I think that's what that is, right,
Wow,
Kelly?
I didn't even realize that was the cost. That's
Yeah.
pretty extensive.
And Doris says thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Well, awesome, awesome. Well, I would like to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Kelly, for sharing with us your experiences. And I mean, it's so important, right, to get the word out. It's so important to share that message. And representation matters. So we want to just thank
Mhm.
you for representing,
Of course.
and representing. And I just love, check out her website. Tamika, you can put that in the chat. But enjoyed the blogs. And as I read through your blogs, I just enjoyed the little things, right? The little things that we as people don't even think about, the little things that we don't even, whatever. But, oh, you got to tell us that one story. I forgot to ask you that question. That
Mhm.
story of inspiration. I sent a boat. Tell us about that. I got a couple minutes because I'm waiting on my next speaker to come online. Um, but tell us about that story of what is it called? I sent a boat for you. Tell us about that story.
Mhm.
I love that inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, so it really ties back to what I was sharing with you all about having faith. And so the story is, it's been a minute since I've shared, but you know, God sends us different things, and He'll send us those things, and we will misstep them. We'll be like, oh, that's not it. That's not God. And He'll send something else. Oh, that's not it. I don't see God in that. And we'll keep on missing it. And so the story is about the story of the sailboat, and where God keeps on sending things, and He sends a boat, but we miss it because we don't think that it's God. And so that's really how I looked at it, is because had it not been for the nurse practitioner's persistence, I likely could have been like my mother and my sister. And so I sent you a boat. So it might not, faith comes in many different ways. And so it may not be faith that I was healed from cancer, but it's the faith that I put in the hands of the doctors to make sure that I got to the other side. And today I'm happy, healed, whole, healthy. I'm able to love on my family, and they're able to love on me. And I can't be mad or sad about that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Kelly. I'm going to play a little music and give us an intermission. Our next speaker is actually running, probably having technical difficulties, so we're going to try to find her. But in the meantime, I'm just going to play a little music and reflect. I am so thankful for Dr. Kelly sharing her message, because just last week we were talking about the concept of making family history and understanding the new norm. And it was such a good conversation, because the good doctor not only retired from 30 years of vascular surgeon, but he made a statement, and he would often say, I get a new patient and I can look at them and I'd say, if I look at your parents, I can tell you what your health is going to be. And his goal and his hope is that we begin to do exactly what Kelly has done. Understanding not only her own health, but her mother's health and her sister's health, so that she can make the decision appropriate for her. But the challenge was, well, how do we make this the standard? How do we make sure that we have more people like Kelly who are essentially aware and making that decision? As she told her story, all I could think about is how lonely that experience had been. If you ever been a pioneer, if you've ever been a person that just kind of steps out there and kind of do things first, you may know what it felt like. But in this case, no words. So I want to thank you guys for hanging out tonight and, really participating in what we call Southern Soul. But I want to let you guys know about next week's show. And about once a year, we do a show on church. Next week's topic is when church is not enough. We're going to have a couple speakers who are going to be thinking about the concept of what happens when you run into crazy relationships, unique health concerns, mental health, trauma, tragedy. In some kind of way you feel like church is not enough. We're actually going to have a pastor to be one of our speakers. And the other person is going to be a previous First Lady.
Thank you for joining us at Southern Soul Livestream Talk Show. Join us weekly at soullivestream.com. If you're joining us live, we'll take a quick music break and then come back for a discussion with the audience.